A Roman general torn between duty and a fiery queen, his empire hanging in the balance. This is the sweeping, passionate tragedy of Antony and Cleopatra. Today, we're diving deep into one of Shakespeare's grandest and, well, most poetic tragedies. It's just renowned for its epic scope and that intense portrayal of a legendary love affair. You've brought us a fascinating stack of material on this play, from scene-by-scene analysis to discussions of its historical and mythological underpinnings. Our mission today is to unpack the core plot, delve into the motivations of its central characters, explore the powerful themes that, still resonate, and find those surprising facts and insights that truly make you well-informed. Really give you a shortcut to understanding this monumental work.
And what a journey it promises to be. This deep dive will help us understand not just what happens in Antony and Cleopatra, but maybe more importantly, why it matters. Connecting its ancient conflicts to timeless human nature and the challenges we still navigate today. We'll explore how conflicting loyalties, the allure of dangerous passion, and the clash of vastly different cultures drive this monumental tragedy, and hopefully reveal some universal truths about ambition, love, and of course the price of power.
Okay, so let's set the stage. Before we even meet our titular characters, Shakespeare masterfully establishes this profound division right at the heart of the play. The stark contrast between Rome and Egypt. This isn't just a geographical difference, is it? It feels much deeper.
Oh, precisely. It's more than just location. This division is the very ground pattern of the play's meanings. It's woven into everything. The sets, the costumes Shakespeare might have imagined, the imagery, the language itself. Think of it as a chasm, really,
Yeah.
so wide and deep that it ultimately tears Antony apart. It's this profound split that even a figure as, colossal as Antony struggles to bridge. It's the central tension driving everything.
And these two worlds, Rome and Egypt, they couldn't be more different in their core identities, could they? When we talk about Roman discipline and values, we're looking at a civilization built on a very specific, almost rigid set of principles. What defines that Roman ethos here?
Well, Rome in Antony and Cleopatra is intrinsically associated with pain, business, and an unwavering, almost brutal sense of duty. It's a place of discipline, austerity, and constant care. Not necessarily self-care, mind you, but care for the empire, for reputation, public order. It operates predominantly from the head, prioritizing logic, calculation, a cold, strategic approach to life. It's depicted as a profoundly secular civilization, one that seems to have, lost its spiritual or mystical roots. Instead, it's focused on relentless conquest and this rigid, aggressively male societal structure.
Right, all about control and order.
Exactly. And even their natural symbols reflect this. Think about the Tiber. Unlike other great rivers, it's not presented as a source of life or fertility, but as a waterway for launching warships. And the war horse. A magnificent creature, sure, but it's nature subdued purely for destructive purposes. It embodies that Roman impulse to dominate. This Roman world is fundamentally public. It's this vast stage where history gets made by the selfish, the realistic, the seemingly invulnerable. It's a patriarchal society, absolutely devoted to masculine and militaristic virtues. Conquest, domination, efficiency, strict discipline.
And love in this world doesn't sound like there's much room for passion.
Not really. Love within this Roman framework is kind of stripped of its passion. It gets reduced to legalistic arrangements, a component of the economic and political structure. Or, as we see, it's relegated to erotic relaxation for warriors, almost like heavy drinking, a temporary indulgence, not something transformative. Women are confined to these two rigid roles, either the dutiful wife, like Octavia, or the exciting whore. There's absolutely no room for the sacred wholeness of the goddess in this worldview. In fact, everything feminine, including what we might call the feminine element within the male psyche, seems repressed to an extreme extent.
So Rome is all control, order, public, masculine power. Then you contrast that with Egypt. It's like stepping into another dimension entirely. Everything about it just breathes sensuality and completely different set of values. What makes Egypt such a stark foil?
Egypt is the absolute antithesis of Rome. It's the living embodiment of everything Rome seems to suppress. It's a realm associated with pleasure, sport, a perpetual sense of holiday almost. Here, excess, extravagance, intoxication, conviviality, they reign supreme. It's the place of the heart and the vibrant, uninhibited life of the senses. Unlike Rome's predictability and its rigid structure, Egypt is portrayed as this place of mystery, strangeness, infinite possibilities. It feels seductively female in its very essence.
And the Nile itself plays a big role in that imagery, doesn't it?
Hugely. In stark contrast to the Tiber, the Nile is the very source of all life forms, described almost as a great serpent mother. This powerful imagery suggests a profound interrelatedness, a sacredness of all life. It hints at a society still practicing nature and fertility religions, honoring the cycles of creation and destruction. Water and fruitfulness are key symbols for Egypt, standing in direct opposition to Rome's perceived land and sterility, its barrenness of spirit. This is a world of generosity, imagination, timelessness, often contained within the intimate privacy of Cleopatra's bedroom, a space for boundless desire and personal expression, not public duty.
That's fascinating about the serpent imagery, too. Usually seen negatively, but not here.
Not in the same way. The snake and serpent imagery that appears throughout the play, often seen as dangerous, especially by the Romans in Egypt, it's archetypal.
Yeah.
It represents life-giving female energies. And it's worth noting, historically, that Egyptians cherished and preserved Cleopatra's memory. They embraced her legend. Rome, on the other hand, with its contrasting values, relentlessly scorned her, tried to erase her. It's quite a difference in historical memory.
So with these two colossal forces clashing, Rome and Egypt, Antony himself becomes the living embodiment of this division. He's stuck right in the middle, isn't he? Torn.
He absolutely is. His internal conflict is the very engine of the play's tragedy. It's the fatal flaw that unravels him. He is simultaneously pulled by his Roman self when he's in Egypt. He feels he hasn't kept his square, kept to his straight, disciplined Roman path. He feels he needs to return to the rule. He might say, these strong Egyptian fetters I must break, or lose myself in dotage. That word again, dotage.
But then he goes back to Rome.
And the moment he's back in Rome, surrounded by its austere demands, he longs intensely for Egypt. He recognizes, in the East my pleasure lies. He laments the dullness of Roman life as this continuous, agonizing oscillation. In Egypt, his anima, that's a Jungian concept, the feminine, sensitive, loving, creative side of his nature, is truly appealed to. It corresponds deeply with Cleopatra. He's valued there not just as a general, but as a lover, a gourmet, a drinker. He thrives in that context of peaceful conviviality and passionate abandon.
Whereas in Rome, it's all about the soldier.
Exactly. In Rome, the very essence of his being is defined by his military prowess, his ability to withstand deprivation in a harsh military context. Shakespeare even powerfully symbolizes this by suggesting his phallus is valued in Egypt, representing his generative, sensual connection to life, while his sword is valued in Rome, representing his military dominating power. This expresses his dotage, where Mars, his military manhood, is quite literally disarmed by Venus, the goddess of love. It shows how each of these powerful forces, Mars and Venus, really needs the other for a balanced individual. But ultimately, in Antony's case, each contributes to the destruction of the other. It leads to imbalance and ruin.
And that idea of Hercules leaving him, that's powerful.
It really is. As Cleopatra's influence grows and his Roman identity wanes, the god Hercules, whom Antony loved and identified with as a symbol of his strength and heroism, metaphorically leaves him. It's a powerful signal of his brokenness, his inner fragmentation.
Fascinating. And this is where it gets truly interesting, With that backdrop set, we meet our legendary lovers. The play opens with Antony utterly consumed by Cleopatra, something his Roman peers immediately see as a grave abandonment of duty, a real scandal.
Indeed. The play immediately frames Antony's condition through the eyes of Roman judgment, which is, highly critical. Philo, an officer loyal to Antony, wastes no time describing Antony's love for Cleopatra as dotage, that term meaning infatuation, senile foolishness. He says it overflows all measure. He laments that Antony's goodly eyes, which once glowed like plated Mars in battle, now turn with office and devotion upon a tawny front, referring to Cleopatra with a distinctly Roman, slightly derogatory tone for her Egyptian heritage.
He paints quite a picture of Antony's decline.
He does. Philo vividly depicts Antony's captain's heart, which in great fights hath burst the buckles on his breast, from exertion and fury, now having become the bellows in the fan to cool a gypsy's lust. It sets the stage perfectly. Antony's devotion to Cleopatra is seen not as noble love, but as shameful emasculation, a debilitating decline from his former Roman glory, and a scandalous dereliction of duty.
And Cleopatra's power over him is just undeniable. She's not just a queen, she's presented as something almost divine, something beyond ordinary women. What gives her this extraordinary hold?
She is described quite powerfully as Shakespeare's first attempt to present the goddess undivided. And that's a truly revolutionary insight, I think. It suggests Shakespeare goes beyond typical portrayals. Unlike other mythologies where the goddess might have been dethroned or degraded, in Egypt, she still represented this sacred wholeness, an integration of all aspects of the feminine principle, divine and earthly. And Enobarbus, Antony's loyal follower and that sharp, cynical observer, give that truly famous account of her first meeting with Antony on the river Cydnus.
Oh, the barge scene.
Exactly. He paints this scene of breathtaking opulence and allure. He says, the barge she sat in like a burnished throne burned on the water. He tells of her perfumed sails, so potent that the winds were lovesick with them. Imagine that, the air itself falling in love. Her very person beggared all description, and her captivating presence made Antony pay his heart for what his eyes eat only, meaning he was so mesmerized by just looking at her that he gave her his soul without even touching her. It captures her power perfectly.
That famous description, age cannot wither her, nor custom stale her infinite variety, is quoted so often. It really highlights what made her unique, almost an enigma. What does that infinite variety truly entail?
It encapsulates her essence perfectly. It's a profound statement about her lasting allure. Other women, Enobarba says, cloy the appetites they feed. They become tiresome, boring. But she makes hungry where most she satisfies. She possesses this unparalleled ability to make vilest things become themselves in her. Even scandalous or morally ambiguous actions seem natural, even blessed when she does them, as if holy priests bless her even when she is riggish, which was a term implying a wanton or sexually unrestrained nature. It just underscores her incredible complexity, her ability to transcend judgment.
So it's not just beauty, it's her whole being.
Exactly. This infinite variety isn't just physical, it's her multifaceted, unpredictable personality. We see her playful nature, joking with Antony about playing billiards, suggesting they go fishing where she imagines catching him like a fish. That's quite playful. And there's that memorable anecdote where she dressed Antony in her tires and mantles, her headdresses and robes, while she wore his sword Philippine.
Flipping the roles completely.
A clear subversion of traditional gender roles, a symbol of her playful dominance and how she could disarm his masculine identity. Yet for all her allure, she's also depicted as deeply manipulative. Remember when Antony reveals he has to leave? She instantly shifts from being sick and sullen to ill and well,
Total emotional control.
demonstrating her theatricality to sway him. And she tests his loyalty constantly, questioning how he could possibly be true to her when he was false to his wife, Fulvia.
Despite this captivating power, Antony is still a Roman general. Duty inevitably pulls him back. His return to Rome creates the severe crisis of divided loyalties, a profound internal battle.
Absolutely. His departure from Egypt is driven by the strong necessity of time and the looming threat of civil swords in Italy. Sextus Pompeius is making advances, and his deceased wife, Fulvia, had stirred up garboils. Civil strife that needed his attention, so he has to go. Roman reality intrudes. Once there, his marriage to Octavia, Caesar's sister, is purely political. He says it himself. I make this marriage for my peace. It's meant to foster a fragile peace, consolidate power among the triumvirs, Antony, Octavius, Lepidus, a marriage of convenience, no passion.
But even as he's making this political move, his heart's elsewhere.
Completely, he confesses, is at east my pleasure lies. This internal tug-of-war, this constant pull between Roman duty and Egyptian desire is immediately clear. It profoundly undermines his ability to be fully present or effective in either world. And remember, the soothsayer warns Antony that his demon, his guiding spirit or destiny, is o'erpowered by Caesar's when they're near each other. Advises him to make space enough, because Caesar's fortunes shall rise higher.
Even Antony sees it, doesn't he, with the dice and the quails?
Yes. Antony himself acknowledges it, noting that the very dice obey him, and in sport, Caesar beats him against the odds. He knows deep down his fate seems tied to and maybe subservient to Caesar's.
That's a fascinating detail, the dice obeying Caesar. Which brings us right to Octavius Caesar himself. He embodies that Roman perspective, the stark opposite of Antony. How does Caesar view Antony, and what does his perspective tell us about Rome?
Well, Caesar sees Antony as utterly consumed by Egyptian revelry. He accuses him of wasting the lamps of night in revel, and being not more manlike than Cleopatra. He basically implies Antony has become effeminate, blurring gender lines in a way that's deeply offensive to Roman sensibilities, which valued that rigid masculinity. Caesar calls Antony the abstract of all faults, someone who'd tumble on the bed of Ptolemy and give a kingdom for a mirth, even stooping to keep the turn of tippling with a slave.
Pure Roman scorn there.
Absolutely. That Roman scorn for anything seen as feminine weakness, including that feminine element in the male psyche Rome repressed, is crystal clear in Caesar's words. Caesar himself is portrayed as the quintessential, calculating, disciplined Roman leader, utterly focused on public matters, the life of calculation. A sharp contrast to Antony's sensuous, heart-driven nature. His rise to power is marked by shrewd strategy and ruthless efficiency. We see him quickly depose Pompey after using him in the war, neutralizes a common enemy, then Pompey's gone. So he turns on Lepidus, denies him rivalry, accuses him, seizes his revenue, rapid consolidation of power. He's establishing his own path to supreme authority.
All head, no heart, as you said, Rome personified.
Precisely. Unlike Antony, he never lets emotion dictate policy.
So Antony tries to juggle these two worlds, Roman duty and Egyptian desire, but the pressure just builds, leads to increasingly desperate choices, and ultimately catastrophe. What happens when Rome and Egypt finally collide in full force, with Antony caught right in the middle?
This is where the tragedy truly accelerates. Antony's conflicted nature, combined with Cleopatra's profound, often manipulative influence, drives him down a path of no return. He systematically alienates his Roman allies, strengthens Caesar's hand, leading to that inevitable brutal collision. His choices become increasingly erratic, driven more by passion than Roman strategy.
And his defiance of Rome really kicks off with those grand public displays of power back in Alexandria. He seems to be doubling down on his Egyptian identity, almost daring Rome.
He absolutely does. And these acts are crucial. They escalate the conflict, a direct challenge to Roman authority. Antony publicly enthrones himself and Cleopatra on silver tribunals in Alexandria's marketplace, seated on opulent gold chairs, a spectacle of imperial hubris. This isn't private. It's a direct public affront to Roman values of austerity and duty. Then, astonishingly, he proclaims their children kings of kings, assigning them vast territories: Media, Parthia, Armenia, Syria, Cilicia, Phoenicia.
Just carving up the East on his own.
Exactly. Acting as an independent sovereign, not a Roman triumvir. And to top it off, Cleopatra appears in the habiliments of the goddess Isis, reinforcing her self-identification with that powerful Egyptian deity. This aligns her with the sacred wholeness of the goddess, fertility, magic, royal authority, a stark contrast to Rome's view of the feminine. She's asserting her divine right, her power, right in Caesar's face.
And Caesar, predictably, uses these actions perfectly. Ignites the final conflict, leading to the disastrous Battle of Actium. Antony just keeps making choices that play right into Caesar's hand, it seems.
Absolutely. Caesar hears about these actions, feels Antony's contemning Rome, holding it in contempt. He immediately leverages these public provocations to fuel Roman anger against Antony, painting him as a traitor, a depraved hedonist, accuses him not just of the displays, but of withholding spoils and ships from past campaigns. So Antony, driven by defiance and against the advice of experienced generals, resolves to fight Caesar, and crucially opts for a sea battle.
A huge mistake, strategically.
A huge mistake. His general Canidius points it out. This decision is heavily influenced by Cleopatra's presence, arguably her own desires. The Battle of Actium then becomes the tragic turning point. During the naval fight, Cleopatra's fearful sails retreat, and Antony, described vividly as like a doting mallard, a foolish duck, claps on his sea wing and flies after her, abandons the fight, his forces.
Unbelievable. For a general like Antony.
It's seen as a profound violation of experience, manhood, honor. And Enobarbus, loyal, shrewd Enobarbus, is utterly disillusioned. He sees this shame, this diminution in our captain's brain. It's this moment that prompts him to abandon Antony. He recognizes, when valor preys on reason, it eats the sword it fights with. Passion has completely consumed judgment, self-destruction.
After such a devastating blow, Antony's decline is rapid. Intense despair, bursts of almost irrational rage. He really starts to come apart, doesn't he?
He is utterly broken. After Actium, Antony is filled with despair. He laments his followers Discandi, melt their sweets on blossoming Caesar. That image, Discandi, like sugar dissolving, melting away from him, drawn to Caesar's rising fortune. He feels profoundly betrayed by this false soul of Egypt, a stark shift from his earlier devotion. His rage turns violent. Remember when he orders Phidias, Caesar's messenger trying to woo Cleopatra, to be severely whipped, demanding to know if he cried?
A really ugly moment. Cruel.
It's a cruel, desperate act born of impotence. He hurls accusations at Cleopatra, boggler ever, unreliable, morsel cold upon dead Caesar's trencher, a discarded scrap, calls her an effeminate influence that eclipsed his terrene moon, his Roman glory. In deep anguish, he declares his good stars that were my former guides have empty left their orbs and shot their fires into the abysm of hell, complete loss of fortune, divine favor.
But he still has these moments where he tries to rally.
Brief, almost delusional surges, proclaiming, I will be treble-sinewed, hearted, breathed, thinking he can still fight, announcing a gaudy night for his captains, a last desperate revel. But his doom feels sealed. That ominous music under the stage that signals the god Hercules whom Antony loved now leaves him, the final abandonment of his heroic identity, leaving him a shell.
The play then hurtles towards its tragic conclusion. But the deaths of Antony and Cleopatra are far from simple, are they? They're steeped in character, choice, a powerful desire to control their own narrative, even in deceit.
Absolutely. Their deaths are a final, defiant assertion of their identities, a deliberate act to challenge the very notion of Roman triumph. It's a powerful exploration of sacrifice and fidelity, although complicated by Cleopatra's characteristic manipulation and a profound concern for her image.
So Cleopatra makes this bold, almost theatrical move, staging her own death, which has a profound, immediate impact on Antony.
She does. Fearing Antony's rage, perhaps still trying to manipulate him, evoke pity, she sends Mardian to tell him she has slain myself,
Right.
and that her last I spoke was Antony. This news utterly devastates Antony. In his despair, he declares, "The long day's task is done and we must sleep." Sees himself unable to hold this visible shape, his glory false played by her to Caesar. Life has no meaning. He's then profoundly inspired by her perceived nobleness and record, her grand gesture, her assertion, "I am conqueror of myself." In response, Antony commands his loyal servant Eros to kill him. But Eros
You can't do it.
cannot strike his master. Instead, he turns the sword on himself, provides Antony a brave instruction in suicide, an act of ultimate loyalty, a silent rebuke of Antony's hesitation. It forces Antony to confront his own faltering resolve.
But even in this final act, Antony can't quite get it right. His suicide is bungled. It makes his death even more poignant and, well, frankly, a bit messy for such a great general.
It is messy. He attempts to follow Eros's example, falls on his sword, but doesn't die immediately. He's found by his guards, alive, agonizing. Asked to be taken to Cleopatra, the pathos is immense. The mighty Antony begging for help to die. He's then lifted to her in her monument, that high tower where she's barricaded. They share a final, heartbreaking embrace. Cleopatra, unable to lower herself, physically pulls him up with her women's help. A powerful image of her still holding some control, even then. Antony dies in her arms. His final words, a mix of love, advice, and that desperate assertion of his Roman identity, urges her to trust none but Dolabella, a Roman who showed kindness, and critically, not basely die, not cowardly put off my helmet to my countrymen, a Roman by a Roman valiantly vanquished.
He's trying to frame his own ending even then.
Exactly. Reclaiming his Roman honor, refusing to be seen as just Caesar's victim.
And after Antony's death, Cleopatra is captured, but she retains this remarkable resolve, formulates her own final strategy to avoid humiliation by Rome. This is her ultimate victory in a way, isn't it?
It absolutely is. Her strategic mind is fully engaged, even now. Captured by Caesar's forces, she learns from Dolabella that Caesar intends to lead her in his triumph through Rome. This prospect, worse than death itself for her. She envisions the ultimate degradation, being shown as an Egyptian puppet to mechanic slaves with greasy aprons, rules, and hammers. Fears being stared at, mocked. Especially fears being portrayed by a squeaking Cleopatra boy actor, the posture of a whore. A horrifying thought for a queen.
Her reputation is everything.
Paramount. She is intensely conscious of and preoccupied with her reputation. Knows the victor's right history. Despite her described extreme physical cowardice and earlier attempts to find painless poison, her ultimate decision to die is driven by her resolve to avoid this public humiliation. To choose her own fate. It's not loss of freedom she fears most, but to be chastised by Octavia's scornful glance as she's paraded through Rome. This is her victory, controlling her narrative, her dignity, her legacy.
And so she engineers her iconic, self-determined death, solidifying her legacy and denying Caesar his ultimate triumph. A powerful, final act of defiance.
This is Cleopatra's crowning moment of defiance, her ultimate self-assertion. She rejects Caesar's offer of grace, subjugation, and embraces her Egyptian identity fully. She states, "Rather a ditch in Egypt, be gentle grave unto me, rather in Nilus's mud lay me stark naked." Choosing her homeland, her elements, over Roman chains, she achieves a truly royal death using an aspic, a small venomous snake delivered by a countryman in a basket of figs. Smuggled past Roman guards, her loyal women, Iris and Charmian, die with her, fulfilling her final command.
And the snake itself, the asp, is so symbolic.
Profoundly symbolic. It represents her serpent power to poison, maybe a response to Antony's perceived betrayal, a fatal bite on her terms, but it also powerfully links back to Egyptian nature religion, that archetype of life-giving female energies, cycles of renewal, transformation. This is Isis claiming her own. Caesar, finding her, acknowledges her noble weakness, a paradox, right? Her weakness led to a noble end. Acknowledges the grandeur of their unified demise, declares, "No grave upon the earth shall clip in it a pair so famous." Recognizes their story's impact, states it's no less in pity than his glory which brought them to be lamented. He even orders her buried by her Antony. A final, ironic concession to their monumental love story, recognizing their legend transcends his own triumph.
Wow. What an incredible journey through this play. So let's bring it back. What does this all mean for us today? It's a sprawling epic, but at its heart are these very human struggles. That conflict between Rome and Egypt is massive externally, but it really highlights the internal battles, especially Antony's. How do these ancient figures connect to our lives now?
That's the crucial question, isn't it? The play is this timeless exploration of fundamental human experiences. They resonate deeply across centuries. It's not just history, it's profound psychology.
The most obvious, maybe, is that intense conflict between love and duty, or honor. That's Antony's central, agonizing struggle, a battle we all face in different ways, I suppose.
It absolutely is the core conflict for Antony and for many of us. He's relentlessly torn between his passionate, consuming love for Cleopatra and his Roman identity, that identity tied to imperial duty, military honor. The tragedy shows he ultimately loses himself by losing his honor to love, becomes unqualitied with very shame as his self-definition erodes. This play vividly demonstrates how conflicting loyalties can lead to personal and public tragedy. It's a challenge people still face constantly, right? Okay. Balancing passionate relationships with professional responsibilities, family allegiances with national duties, even conflicting moral principles.
Makes you ask.
What do you prioritize?
Yep.
Exactly. When your heart pulls one way and obligations another. And while Cleopatra's love is sometimes manipulative, especially that staged death, it is ultimately shown as profound. She joins him in death. Her dream of Antony elevates him to this cosmic godlike figure. Legs bestride the ocean. Voice was propertied as all the tuned spheres. She envisions him as truly universal, magnificent, highlights the depth of her feeling. Amidst all the power plays, there was genuine cosmic love. That, for me, is a truly surprising insight.
And hand in hand with that is the theme of power and identity. Antony's identity really unravels, while Cleopatra, strike in contrast, seems to solidify hers. What can we learn from their journeys in defining who they are?
That's a crucial point. Antony's identity as a soldier, a triumvir, it's systematically eroded by his entanglement with Cleopatra, leaves him feeling unqualitied with very shame, losing his defining Roman virtues, his sense of self. He doesn't know who he is without that rigid Roman structure. Cleopatra, in contrast, asserts her identity, not just queen, but the goddess Isis, embodying her mythological significance. She reclaims her power even in defeat, in death, refuses to be defined or diminished by Caesar's victory. The play profoundly explores how individuals navigate choices when faced with overwhelming power structures, how intensely personal desires clash with rigid public expectations, the demands of empire.
Makes you think about how much of our identity is really our own versus shaped by external forces.
Exactly. How much is shaped by our deepest desires and how much by societal expectations or political systems.
Beyond the history, the play also delves into powerful gender dynamics and the feminine principle. It challenges Roman patriarchal norms in a way that feels incredibly modern.
It truly does. Cleopatra is a radical figure here, a character who profoundly challenges male supremacy and that Roman view of women. She's not easily categorized as a dutiful wife like Octavia, nor merely an exciting whore. She's presented as a goddess undivided, embodying that sacred wholeness Rome repressed. Her character is incredibly complex. Playful eroticism, fierce ambition, remember, her supreme ambition is to rule in Rome, not just Egypt, and even profound maternal feelings when Caesar threatens her children. Her death, framed in rich Egyptian mythology, a conscious choice for self-determination over Roman subjugation. It can be powerfully seen as a feminist statement.
Refusing to be marginalized.
Precisely. Refusing to be relegated to the periphery of social existence, she sallies forth to conquer patriarchal territories, even in death, asserting her agency and dignity against a world trying to define and diminish her. She reclaims her power, even as she loses her life.
And finally, there's that undeniable allure and the destructive force of dangerous passion. It's at the very core of this tragedy. Feels like both a warning and maybe a celebration.
It's both, isn't it? The destructive force of overwhelming passion is vividly evident in their relationship. Their love is so intense, Cleopatra declares, eternity was in our lips and eyes. That feeling of boundless, timeless connection. Yet this very passion, this all-consuming fire, costs them an empire. This theme resonates powerfully with contemporary understandings, how intense emotional connections, while beautiful, transformative, can indeed lead to catastrophic consequences if not balanced with reason, self-awareness, external responsibilities. The play forces us to consider the grand scale of human emotion, its immense capacity for both creation and, well, ultimately destruction.
Poses the question, how much are we willing to sacrifice for love?
And what happens when that sacrifice consumes everything else, leading to a kind of glorious ruin?
What a sweeping deep dive this has been. From the cosmic scale of empire to the deeply personal, passionate connection between Antony and Cleopatra. It truly shows us how timeless these human stories are. They remind us that the struggle between our desires and our duties, between passion and reason, between the Romes and the Egypts within us is, well, a universal human experience.
And what's truly fascinating here, I think, is that even in their defeat, Antony and Cleopatra achieve a kind of victory. They choose their own end. They transform a potential spectacle of Roman subjugation into a testament to their love, their defiance. Their story, as Caesar himself acknowledges, is no less in pity than his glory that brought them to be lamented. It leaves us with this profound sense of sorrow inherent in lives lived so grandly, so passionately, and yes, so destructively. Their choices, even flawed, secure them a place in history far beyond mere military conquest.
Perhaps the enduring lesson of Antony and Cleopatra isn't just about their specific historical tragedy, but about the sacrifices we all make, the loyalties we choose, and the ultimate courage it takes to define our own dignity in the face of an indifferent or even hostile world. It really makes you wonder, in your own life, what are the competing Romes and Egypts pulling at your heart? And which path will you ultimately choose?